How shameless. A nanny who doesn't know her place, thinking she can marry up just because she took care of the Fletcher brothers for a few years. What a joke. The moment the news broke that Miss Vance was back, they dropped her like a hot potato for all of us to laugh at. If I were her, I'd just die of embarrassment. Dressing up all fancy can't hide the reek of poverty. The crowd's mocking gazes wrapped around Aurora Shaw, each word a jeer at her wishful thinking. Yes, she had indeed misunderstood. Just yesterday, the two brothers had whisked her away, insisting she pick out a gown and accessories. The Fletcher family was hosting a party for them tomorrow, and she, as the great benefactor who had helped them recover, would be formally thanked. When Flynn Fletcher had said this, his eyes were filled with an unconcealable joy. He'd glance at Aurora, then quickly look away, as if nursing a secret. After they finally finished trying on gowns, Julian Fletcher was called away by a phone call. Flynn eagerly led her to his room. He bit his lip, his eyelashes trembling slightly with nervousness. "I'm going to say something very important at the party tomorrow. Very, very important, so you have to listen carefully. Aurora, I want to watch the snow with you this year." In that instant, Aurora's mind flashed back to the winter when Flynn's blindness had not yet healed. She had led him to the doorway, letting him feel the snowflakes fall around them, making the softest sound. After only a moment outside, Flynn had fumbled to go back in, but he slipped on the icy ground. Humiliated and furious, he grabbed a handful of snow and hurled it in her direction, his voice laced with venom. "Are you doing this on purpose to laugh at me? You know I'm blind, yet you bring me out to watch the snow. Are you trying to humiliate me? Are you satisfied seeing me like this?" Aurora sighed and stood perfectly still, letting him vent his frustration. Then, she knelt, packed a small snowman and placed it in his palm. "Some things you only realize are etched in your heart when you can't see them. Feel it carefully. Can you remember what it's like when it snows now?" Just as the little snowman was about to melt, Aurora took out a handkerchief with a faint, clean scent of soap and carefully wiped the slush from his hand. Then she heard Flynn ask in a puzzled tone, "Aurora, is it only when you can't see that you find what's in your heart? But why is it that all I can picture right now is your face?" At that moment, under a sky full of snow, Aurora said nothing, but she clearly heard the sudden, rapid thumping of her own heart answering him. After returning from the party, Aurora changed out of the heavy gown. Back in her small room, she expertly retrieved a worn notebook from a drawer. She flipped through it, page by page, until her eyes blurred and warm tears streamed down, dripping onto the paper. It was as if she was crying out all the grievances she had suffered over the years. She remembered her mother's gaunt, withered face as she lay on her deathbed, whispering weakly, "Little fish, my two biggest regrets in this life are not being able to give you a good life, and not being able to go to Switzerland myself. If you ever get the chance, please go see it for me. See just how beautiful it is, so beautiful that it made that man never want to come back to me." After what felt like an eternity, Aurora closed the notebook and put it back in the drawer. From inside, she took out another document. It was the employment contract she had signed to care for Julian and Flynn Fletcher. The contract was for 5 years, and there were only 7 days left until it ended. Then I'll use these 7 days to say a proper goodbye, she thought. It was time to put a period on this chapter of her life. As the sun began to set, Julian and Flynn Fletcher returned together. They were rarely talkative when alone. Her presence usually eased the tension between them. But now it seemed she was no longer needed, because returning with them was Victoria Vance. The two tall men flanked her, protective. Flynn was bent slightly, trying to make conversation while constantly watching Victoria's expression. Even the usually taciturn Julian had a hint of a smile on his lips. They looked harmonious and warm. Victoria playfully tapped Flynn's forehead, her tone chiding. "Flynn, why are you so childish? Even if you were upset, you can't just shave a girl's head." He scoffed. "She's just a nanny. It's not like her hair won't grow back." Victoria pouted, pretending to be angry. "So if I make you angry one day, are you going to shave my head too?" At this, Flynn threw up his hands in surrender. "My little princess, how could I ever get angry at you? Besides, if anyone dared to make you lose a single hair, I'd make them pay 1,000 times over." Aurora had never seen Flynn so humble and eager to please. She listened in silence, a bitter taste in her mouth, because the nanny whose head Flynn had shaved was her. After Julian and Flynn's car accident, they were all but abandoned by the main family. The servants were reassigned, leaving only the two of them, both with limited mobility, in the large villa. It was around that time that her mother was diagnosed with a fibroma, requiring a large sum of money for tests and treatment. She had only been living at the Fletcher estate as a dependent of her mother. Desperate for money, she had approached Julian and proposed a caretaking arrangement, signing the contract that made her their exclusive nanny. Back then, not long after the accident, Flynn couldn't accept the reality of his blindness. He rejected anyone who tried to get close to him. After Aurora had used a bit of force to make him eat, Flynn decided to get revenge. He snuck into her room in the dark and, with a razor, shaved off the waist-length hair she had grown for years. Afterward, Flynn had brandished the weapon triumphantly. "Try to pull a stunt on me again, and it'll be worse than this." Aurora had cried all night, clutching the pile of hair on the floor. And now, Flynn was using that story as a joke to entertain someone else. The three of them were so engrossed in their conversation that they only noticed the fourth person in the room when they reached the living room. "It's been a while, Aurora. There's $1 million on this card. A little thank you for taking such good care of Julian and Flynn all these years." Victoria Vance pulled a credit card from her purse and held it out. Aurora didn't take it. She had been sitting there, waiting, wanting to ask if, after all these years, she was still just a nanny in their hearts. If so, why had they said all those things that made her hope? She looked up at the two men standing not far away, but they wouldn't even spare her a glance, their attention completely focused on Victoria. Perhaps that was her answer right there. Aurora stood up, her voice faint. "It was my job. You don't have to go to the trouble, Miss Vance." Seeing this, Victoria didn't press, simply retracting the card. "Well, in that case, allow me to offer a piece of advice. The Fletcher household has strict rules. Now that Julian and Flynn are back in the company, there will be guests coming and going. It would be best if you didn't make the mistake of sitting on the main sofa again, Miss Shaw. We wouldn't want anyone to see. I'm just reminding you out of kindness. I'd hate for you to live here so long you start thinking you're the lady of the house and behave inappropriately." Finished, she turned to Julian. "Right, Julian." Julian gave her an indulgent smile, his voice gentle. "Whatever Vicky says." Hearing his reply, Aurora's eyes reddened. In the past, she had taken care of their every need, from meals to daily routines. No matter how tired she was, she abided by the rules, never eating or sitting with them. Only when they were napping in the afternoon would she steal a few moments of rest, her head on the dining table. Over time, she developed a chronic backache. One day, she had drifted off at the table, so exhausted that she hadn't even noticed when Julian moved her to the sofa. When she woke up to the soft, comfortable feeling beneath her, she shot up in a panic, ready to apologize. But Julian had told her gently, "It's just the three of us here, Aurora. You can think of this as your home." She had tried to refuse, saying she wouldn't dare overstep, but he had feigned distress. "If you don't agree, I'll just have to carry you over here time and again with these useless legs." On that day, Aurora had felt a flicker of warmth. And today, she was seeing reality with cold clarity once more. Aurora gave a bitter smile and replied in a low voice, "I'm sorry. I'll be more careful from now on. It won't happen again." Each step she took as she turned to leave felt as if it weighed 1,000 pounds. Tears streamed down her face, betraying her. Back in her room, she pulled out her phone and booked a one-way ticket to Switzerland. The Aurora Shaw who walked out of the Fletcher house in 7 days would be someone starting anew. That evening, Aurora prepared dinner according to Julian and Flynn's tastes as usual. As she turned to eat her own separate portion in the kitchen, Victoria called out to her. "Why don't you join us, Miss Shaw? I remember you also grew up on the Fletcher estate, didn't you? There are no outsiders here today. It's a good chance to catch up." Aurora was about to refuse when Flynn spoke, his brow furrowed. "Just sit down if she tells you to, and wipe that miserable look off your face. Vicky just got back, don't ruin her mood." The atmosphere was heavy. Aurora had no choice but to sit. Just as she picked up her chopsticks to reach for a dish, Victoria laughed as if remembering something funny. "I just remembered seeing you when I came to the main estate for dinner as a child, Miss Shaw." Aurora's hand trembled, and her face went pale. She felt unsteady in her seat. Victoria propped her chin on her hand and continued, as if talking to herself. "Julian and Flynn were there too, weren't they? I was being picky and ran off because I didn't like the food. You two were worried and followed me. And then I saw you, Miss Shaw, sitting in a corner with a bowl. I was curious and went to take a look, but I accidentally knocked it over. A dog suddenly shot out, snatched the meat from the ground, and ran off. You were so desperate you actually chased after it and started fighting that dog for the piece of meat." As she spoke, she began to giggle, covering her mouth as if it were the most hilarious story in the world. Aurora's knuckles turned white as she gripped her chopsticks, unable to speak. It had been shortly after her mother had brought her to live at the Fletcher estate. She was at an age where she was always hungry and growing. It was only during the main family's banquets that she could eat well. In her panic, she had indeed fought a dog for a piece of meat. To have this old shame brought up and laid bare on the table was a deliberate act of humiliation. No wonder you've been so willing to stay by Julian and Flynn's side all these years, working so tirelessly, Victoria mused. Perhaps if you could just latch onto one of them, you'd never have to go back to that miserable life you had as a child. Vicky, that's enough. Stop it. For once, Flynn didn't join in, cutting the topic short. Aurora looked up, thinking he might defend her. But then she heard him say, "My brother and I aren't idiots. We wouldn't let just anyone marry into the Fletcher family." Julian also put down his chopsticks, his voice low but firm. "Miss Shaw is merely in our employ. Flynn and I are grateful for her help during our rehabilitation, but that is all. I would advise Miss Shaw not to get any improper ideas." Their words were like blades twisting in her heart. Her body swayed, and she instinctively gripped the table for support. The last flicker of hope within her died. Of course. How could she still harbor any foolish expectations for these two? She had been wrong from the very beginning. She should have stuck to her role as a nanny and never offered them her genuine heart. That night, Aurora lay in bed, her mind replaying the last 5 years. Why did one appearance from Victoria Vance make all those good memories vanish, as if they never existed? She had never deluded herself with fantasies of marrying into the Fletcher family. All she wanted was to draw a little warmth from this place. After her mother passed away 2 years ago, she had no one, no friends, no family. They were the ones who said she could consider this place her home, giving her a sense of belonging. More than 1,000 days and nights of companionship, yet a few words from Victoria had twisted it into a narrative of a social climber. A sparrow trying to become a phoenix. She didn't understand how people could change so completely overnight. Just a day ago, they were holding her hand, telling her they wanted to thank her at the party. The more she thought, the more sleep eluded her. She finally got up and walked out of her room. Gazing at the moon, Aurora found herself wandering toward the swimming pool. The moonlight flickered, and she unseasonably remembered the day her relationship with Julian had grown closer. After the car accident, the outside world whispered that the golden boy of the Fletcher family had become a cripple, confined to a wheelchair and unable to care for himself. Since arriving at the villa, Aurora had spent her days in a battle of wits with the volatile and difficult Flynn. It was only with Julian that she found a moment's peace. So she cherished her time with him, felt a bit closer to him, and unconsciously tried to shield him from the outside world's harsh gossip. He was always gentle and polite, never showing a hint of negativity, until that one night. Thirsty, she had gone to the living room for a glass of water. In the dead of night, she heard the sound of running water from Julian's room, a sound that didn't stop. After knocking for the 3rd time and getting no response, Aurora pushed the door open in a panic. She instinctively looked toward the bed, only to find it empty. Following the sound of the water, her eyes fell upon a horrifying sight. Julian, fully submerged in the bathtub. She scrambled to pull him out, but he shoved her away with unexpected force. Julian's eyes were red, his entire being radiating a chilling aura. For the first time, he spoke to her in a tone as cold as frost. "Who let you in?" "Get out." Aurora trembled with fear but didn't obey. Instead, she forced herself closer, dragging him out of the tub. "If something happens to you, no one will pay my salary, your family might even come after me. I have a duty to ensure your safety." Her constant struggles with Flynn had given her surprising strength. Though it was difficult, she managed to get him back to the bed. For a moment, they were silent. The usually gentle man was now expressionless, like a lifeless doll, devoid of any vitality. But Aurora's sharp eyes noticed the unnatural trembling in his legs and the paleness of his lips. She realized he was in pain. She brought a basin of hot water, soaked a towel, and placed it on his knees. "Is this better? My mom used to have rheumatism, and a hot compress like this always made her feel much better." Julian didn't answer, his dark eyes fixed on her. Aurora didn't mind. She continued to replace the cooling towel with a freshly soaked hot one. After a long while, Julian finally spoke. "Aren't you afraid I'll fire you for going against my wishes like this?" Aurora's hand paused. She didn't lie. "I am. But I'm more afraid you'll die in there." Hearing this, Julian suddenly laughed, a sound laced with sorrow. If the old Julian Fletcher had died, perhaps many would have mourned. But now I'm just a waste. If I die, I die. Who would care? Since I was a child, I grew up under the expectations of the Fletcher elders. I had to be the best at everything, couldn't make a single misstep. Even if I was scared, I couldn't show the slightest hint of retreat, or countless opportunistic relatives would be waiting to tear a piece from me. Now they have their wish. Aurora listened quietly, not interrupting. That night, it was as if Julian was pouring out all the words he had held back for years. Finally, he said, "Do you know, before you found me, I had tried to drown myself countless times, to just die like that. But I always failed. And today, I was so close to succeeding, but you saved me. Aurora, you're the one who gave me hope to live again. Will you stay with me and help me stand up once more?" Looking at the fragile man before her, who seemed ready to shatter at any moment, Aurora nodded without hesitation. "I will." After that, she would diligently apply hot towels to his knees every day. She researched and made him different kinds of nourishing congee. She would catch him again and again when he was about to fall during his physical therapy. At the time, she thought they had been through hardship together, that they could be considered friends. But now, just because Victoria Vance had returned, that unrealistic fantasy was shattered. Her thoughts returned to the present. The night breeze sent a chill through her. Aurora stood up to go back inside, but her gaze fell on the center of the pool. Julian was in the water, slowly sinking. The scene overlapped with that night from years ago. Without a second thought, she jumped in. But the moment she hit the water, an overwhelming fear enveloped her. Childhood memories flooded her mind. It felt as if invisible hands were pulling her down. She struggled, opening her mouth to cry for help, only to have water rush into her nose and throat. After what seemed like an eternity, a pair of strong hands grabbed her, pulling her to the surface. Like a drowning person clutching a straw, Aurora clung desperately to the person in front of her. When she could finally breathe, she saw who had saved her. It was Julian. Before she could thank him, a third voice came from the poolside. "Aurora, you're just like Vicky said, a scheming woman who'd do anything to marry into the Fletcher family. All these years of pretending. It must have been exhausting. Do you want me to give you an award for Best Actress?" Flynn stood on the edge of the pool, his eyes locked on the two of them in the water, their position intimate. The fury in his eyes was about to erupt. Julian pulled her to a safe area and then, without a word of explanation for her, got out of the pool and left. "Aurora, I thought you were different from those other women. Turns out your methods are just more sophisticated. Should I praise your patience? To be able to keep up the act in front of me for so long. It disgusts me." With that, Flynn violently ripped the bronze talisman from his neck and threw it, hard, at her face. She had once braved a snowstorm to climb a mountain and pray for that charm for him. He had put it on so carefully, then held her frozen, red hands in his own to warm them. "This pendant," he had vowed, "I'll never take it off. If I do, may I never get what I want and die alone." With a trembling hand, Aurora picked up the fallen talisman from the ground, her fingers tracing the lingering warmth on its surface. The moonlight illuminated her face, leaving her humiliation nowhere to hide. After a long moment, she threw the talisman into the pool. So be it. She was leaving anyway. There was no point in explaining. It was a sleepless night. The next morning, Aurora left the house early. It was her first time going abroad, and there was much to prepare. She returned around noon to make lunch, but her phone rang. It was Flynn. "Vicky is having a piano recital today. You should come too." Aurora found it strange. Victoria clearly disliked her, so why would she be invited to her performance? As she was thinking of a refusal, he added, "She just got back and the house staff is short-handed. Come and lend a hand." So that was it. Perhaps after last night's ordeal, Aurora had finally accepted her place. Flynn's words no longer caused the slightest ripple in her heart. She just wanted to get her visa sorted out as quickly as possible and leave the Fletcher house that had imprisoned her entire youth. Of course, second young master. On the other end of the line, Flynn fell silent. He hadn't heard that title in a long time. Back then, he had thrown tantrums and gone on hunger strikes just to force her to call him by his name. She had finally relented, promising not to use the distant title, second young master, anymore. For some reason, hearing it again now, he felt a hollow space open up in his chest, as if something was quietly slipping away. But Flynn didn't have time to dwell on it. He had more important things to do. Vicky's piano recital, disguised as a welcome home party, had to be perfect. Aurora quickly tidied herself up and hurried to Victoria Vance's residence. As soon as she opened the door, she saw Flynn, the same Flynn who usually needed help just to pour a glass of water standing on a ladder, wiping down a crystal chandelier. Flynn was just as the rumors described him, arrogant, wild, and utterly resistant to advice. But here he was, willingly and personally helping Victoria prepare for her recital. To outsiders, this humbling display was seen as a sign of his deep affection for her. A few maids were squatting together, trimming flowers for the party, whispering among themselves in envy. The second young master of the Fletcher family is so devoted. The moment he heard they were short-staffed, he rushed right over. He doesn't act like a young master at all. Aurora heard this and found it absurd. Flynn's young master attitude was anything but small. When she had first started caring for him, he had tormented her in new ways every day. He was incredibly demanding. If the water she brought him was even slightly too warm, he would mercilessly splash it on her face and make her get another glass. Seeing him now, willingly doing manual labor, a pang of sourness still pricked her heart. But it lasted only a moment before she stepped inside. When Victoria saw her, a contemptuous smirk played on her lips as she approached and gave orders with practiced ease. "You're just in time. Go and polish the piano, I'll be playing tonight." Aurora nodded and, carrying a bucket, walked past Flynn. He didn't even spare her a glance, his entire focus on cleaning the crystal chandelier. Aurora filled a bucket with water and began meticulously polishing the expensive piano. Her hand accidentally brushed a key, producing a single, beautiful note. She felt a daze come over her as a deeply buried memory surfaced. There was a piano in the Fletcher villa as well. But when Aurora had come to care for the brothers, one was a cripple and the other was blind, so the piano had sat unused. Still, she had dutifully wiped every speck of dust from it, trying to keep it looking pristine. One day, while cleaning, she had accidentally pressed a key. Flustered, she had moved to close the lid, but a large hand reached out from behind and stopped her. Julian had appeared behind her, guiding her hand to the keys. His voice, as smooth as fine wine, floated into her ear, his breath warm on her skin. "Don't be afraid, I'll guide you." Perhaps the atmosphere that day had been too perfect, and she had forgotten how to refuse. She let his well-defined hands cover hers, drawing a moving melody from the instrument. She couldn't tell if it was excitement or nervousness, but she knew that after that day, something had changed. Her thoughts returned to the present. As if the memory was replaying before her, Aurora fought back the tears welling in her eyes. She pushed the memory away. After polishing the piano, she helped with a few other tasks before retreating to a corner, trying to remain unnoticed. The banquet began, and the piano was brought onto the stage. She stood in the corner, watching Victoria in her beautiful gown under the spotlight, and Julian and Flynn in the audience applauding. They looked so perfect together. It was truly a world she could never hope to enter. Victoria raised her hands. The roar of the crowd fell silent, as if on pause. Everyone held their breath, watching the woman on stage. A few notes floated out, captivating the audience. But suddenly, in the middle of her performance, Victoria cried out in pain. "Ouch, why is there a razor blade in the piano?" A few drops of crimson blood welled up on her fingertip. In the audience, Julian and Flynn's faces darkened. They immediately rushed to her side. The anguish in Flynn's eyes was overflowing. The guests began to murmur amongst themselves. Victoria's eyes filled with tears, her voice choked with sobs. Only Aurora touched this piano. Was she angry because you asked her to come? But why didn't she just tell me directly? Flynn, it hurts so much. Will my hand be scarred? Her words fueled Flynn's rage. His eyes scanned the crowd, searching for Aurora. Aurora's face was ashen. She didn't understand how this could have happened. She rushed forward to explain. I didn't do it. I don't know why there was a razor blade in there, but her explanation sounded feeble, like a desperate excuse to their ears. Flynn whipped his head around to face her, a storm brewing in his eyes as if he wanted to devour her whole. Don't be afraid, Vicky. I told you, if anyone dares to hurt you, I'll make them pay 1,000 times over. After saying this, Flynn gently pushed Victoria out of his arms and slowly advanced on Aurora. A feeling of intense dread grew within Aurora. The terrifying aura radiating from him forced her to take 2 steps back. When her back hit a wall, Flynn violently grabbed her hands and yanked her forward. His grip was crushingly strong, as if he wanted to snap her wrists. She stumbled and struggled, but she was no match for his strength. Flynn dragged her toward the piano. Aurora's eyes widened in terror. No, Flynn, you can't do this to me. I've been too lenient with you these past few years. It's made you forget your place. Let this be a lesson to you. Without a shred of mercy, Flynn slammed her hands down onto the razor blades and dragged them back and forth. The excruciating pain triggered Aurora's survival instinct. She instinctively looked toward Julian. But she saw him subtly shield Victoria behind him, his gaze on her cold as ice. His reaction was like a rope twisting tightly around her heart, a suffocating, dull ache that left her utterly devastated. For a moment, she forgot to struggle. Only when her hands were bleeding profusely did Flynn finally let go, allowing her to collapse to the floor. For the first time, Aurora felt completely lost and helpless. Even if she wanted to leave, she didn't want this humiliating, ugly scene to be her final memory. She was surrounded by the crowd, like a sinner awaiting judgment. No one listened to her explanation, and no one stood in front of her to protect her. But she had done nothing wrong. Flynn frowned at Victoria's wound, his voice soft. Vicky, I'll take you to the hospital. Your hands are for playing the piano. I'll make sure they heal perfectly. With that, he swept Victoria into his arms and carried her out the door. Julian took out his phone and called his assistant. Contact the best dermatological restoration specialist in the country and have them come to the Fletcher family's private hospital immediately. They surrounded Victoria as they left, treating her like the most precious treasure in the world. After the crowd dispersed, the blood from Aurora's hands began to coagulate. She struggled to her feet and let out a self-mocking laugh. The memory of Victoria's triumphant expression as she was carried away flashed in her mind. So that was it. This was Victoria's way of putting her in her place. Aurora's hands required 16 stitches. She could only pack her belongings for her trip abroad slowly and painfully. Fortunately, Julian and Flynn didn't come back for the next few days. She didn't have to do any other chores, which minimized the frequency of the throbbing pain in her hands. She opened her phone, intending to search for essentials needed for traveling abroad, but she accidentally opened her social media feed and saw a post from Flynn. In the photo, he and Julian stood on either side of Victoria. Behind them was the azure sea, and all 3 wore bright smiles. The caption read, "Took our little princess Vicky to the beach to relax. Reminded me of how we first met, when the brave princess saved the knights who would protect her for a lifetime." Aurora liked the post, then returned to her friends list. She unpinned Julian and Flynn from the top and sent them each a message. "The 5-year contract is up. We owe each other nothing. Goodbye forever." After sending the messages, she blocked and deleted them both, then grabbed her suitcase and walked out of the Fletcher house. Elsewhere, Julian and Flynn received the message simultaneously. Flynn's expression changed. He subconsciously sent a question mark back, only to see the red exclamation point pop up. He looked up at Julian and, seeing his grim face, guessed that he had also been deleted. Flynn glanced at Victoria swimming by the shore, grabbed his jacket from a chair, and rushed to leave. "You stay here with Vicky. I'm going back to see what kind of trick Aurora is playing this time." But the usually composed Julian didn't agree. Instead, he stopped him. "I'll go back. You stay and take care of Vicky. Aurora probably doesn't want to see you right now." At his words, a flicker of remorse crossed Flynn's face. He had lost his temper that day and punished Aurora in front of so many people. It had been too much. But now, a panic was rising in his chest, and he couldn't calm down. He knew Aurora. She was tolerant, gentle. Even when faced with his endless provocations, she never backed down, but instead met his hidden helplessness and despair time and again. A woman like that would never use leaving as a threat. This meant she was serious. Realizing this, he grew even more agitated, wanting to rush back and demand an explanation. As they stood in a stalemate, a cry for help suddenly came from Victoria at the beach. The brothers exchanged a look and, without a word, ran toward the sea, jumping in to pull her out. After coughing up the water in her throat, a blush appeared on Victoria's face. "Thank you. I've been afraid of water since I was a child. I could never play at the beach like other people. But with you by my side from now on, I won't be afraid of anything." She expected them to promise to protect her for life, just as they always had. But instead, Flynn shoved her away. Startled, she looked up. Both men were staring at her, their faces dark, their gazes piercing. "You've been afraid of water since you were a child?" Victoria, not yet realizing her slip, nodded. "I have aquaphobia. My parents strictly forbid me from going near water. Thank goodness I have you too." She tried to lean into Julian's arms, but he subtly moved away. "So you weren't the one who saved us back then?" Victoria had lived a life of such ease for so long that she had forgotten her old deception. She hastily tried to backtrack. It was me, I just forgot." But the absolute trust and adoration were gone from their faces. They exchanged a look and, with a shared understanding, ran off. A single thought dominated both their minds. They absolutely could not let Aurora just leave. At Crestwood International Airport, Aurora, dragging a simple suitcase, boarded the plane to Switzerland. After this departure, a new beginning awaited. By the time the brothers returned to the villa, it was empty. A terrible premonition washed over Flynn. He ran, nonstop, toward her room. He pushed open the door. Inside, the bedding was neatly folded, a simple desk stood against the wall, and a vase on the windowsill held some wilted lavender. At first glance, it seemed as if nothing had changed. But Flynn had been here countless times. How could he not see the difference? He swayed on his feet, stumbling into the room. His eyes scanned every corner meticulously. Wrong. It was all wrong. On the desk, there should have been the pixelated dog model he had built for her with his own hands. It was the first gift he had given her after his sight returned. He had been so clumsy, messing up the pieces several times, losing his patience, and smashing it on the floor in a fit of pique. At those times, Aurora would patiently pick up the pieces, wipe them clean, and place them back in his hands. Her voice, as clear as a spring stream, would soothe all his frustration. "Let's finish it together, okay? That will make it more meaningful." They had sat shoulder to shoulder, yet he had found it harder to concentrate than when he was alone. When their hands occasionally brushed, his heart felt like it would burst from his chest. When the pixelated model was finished, a little spotted dog stood before them. "It looks just like you," she had said, her tone filled with laughter. All fierce-looking. She held it in both hands, studying it seriously. The sunlight pouring in from the window cast a soft filter over her. Her smile was so beautiful, he could barely look away. The more Flynn remembered, the more panicked he felt. He searched frantically, finally spotting the scattered pieces of the model in the trash can. But that wasn't all. A photo of them together had been torn to shreds and thrown in as well. Beside it lay an unfinished gray scarf. Flynn vaguely remembered. A few months ago, Aurora had been sitting beside him, looking at the falling leaves outside the window. "This winter looks like it will be very cold," she had said. "Should I knit you a scarf?" But now, all those things, laden with sweet memories of the past, were thrown in the trash. Flynn felt as if he'd been struck by lightning, frozen to the spot. "Is she done with me?" The thought nearly drove him mad. He emptied the trash can, trying to reassemble the broken pieces, but his hands trembled so violently that he couldn't. "Aurora, are you angry with me?" He murmured to the empty room, his voice hoarse. "This is the first time I've ever seen you this angry. How can you be so cruel? You won't even give me a chance to apologize." "It's okay. As soon as I fix this, I'll come find you and apologize, all right?" The sound of hurried footsteps came from behind him. Julian stood in the doorway. He looked inside. He had already checked the villa's security footage. The video showed Aurora leaving the villa, dragging a suitcase. Her hand was wrapped in layers of gauze. Wincing from the pain, she would walk a few steps before switching hands to pull the luggage. Julian, a man who could sign billion-dollar contracts without flinching, felt his mind go blank as he watched the footage. He knew her background. A single-parent family, following her mother to the Fletcher estate, then caring for them after her mother fell ill. After her mother's death, her life had revolved almost entirely around the two of them. Julian couldn't imagine where else she could go. He had even called the places where she usually bought groceries. The answer was always the same. "We're not sure. Miss Shaw hasn't been here to buy groceries in days." She was really gone. The villa had always been just the three of them. Now, without Aurora, it felt cavernously empty. Julian watched Flynn kneeling on the floor, desperately trying to piece together the broken model, and gave a bitter laugh. He, it seemed, had never received a gift from Aurora. The truth was, he had never been that fond of Victoria. He had simply felt indebted to her for saving his life, so he had shown her his gentle side. Furthermore, as one of the most watched heirs to the Fletcher Group, his family had long planned for him to marry Victoria, so he treated her with special favor. Julian had grown up surrounded by schemes and calculations. How could he not see through Victoria's petty tricks? He had just seen them so often they no longer seemed strange. Everyone in their social class was like that. On the surface, they were deferential and all smiles. The next moment, they would team up with others to crush you underfoot. He had to seize every opportunity to secure his position in the family, just to survive in this dog-eat-dog world. Marrying Victoria was a crucial step to consolidating his power, so he couldn't yield, even if his own brother loved her. But when he and Flynn were at each other's throats, both on the verge of ruin, she had walked away without a backward glance. Julian had once again witnessed the coldness of the human heart, and he had paid a terrible price. He became the family's reject, the meticulous planning of his past 20-odd years reduced to a joke. He even developed self-destructive tendencies. It was then that Aurora appeared. She had pulled him out of the mud he was rotting in, standing before him, gently waiting for him to stand up and walk toward her again. She had nothing, yet she could so gently accept all of him. He looked out the window as a few sparrows flew past, soaring into the sky. I can't just let her leave, Julian thought. She was the only warmth he had ever truly felt, the first thing he had ever genuinely wanted to hold on to. He couldn't bear to let her go, and he wouldn't. Julian and Flynn turned the city of Crestwood upside down, but found no trace of Aurora. They had just taken back control of the company, and the news of their frantic search for a woman became the talk of the town. It was only then that people in their circle remembered the little nanny who had been abandoned at the party. To search so publicly for another woman, anyone could see that the position of the future Mrs. Fletcher was about to change hands. Victoria, who had been doted on by both brothers since childhood so much so that they had nearly ruined their own futures for her, could not stand such gossip. She stormed into the top floor office of the Fletcher Group. The path was clear. No one dared to stop her. Julian, the Vance and Fletcher families have always been close. For you to cause such a city-wide scandal over a woman, where does that leave my reputation? Victoria slammed her handbag onto the sofa, throwing a familiar tantrum, waiting for someone to placate her. But the man in the leather chair didn't seem to hear her, continuing to flip through the documents in his hand. A flash of annoyance crossed Victoria's face. She remembered being abandoned on the beach a few days ago. Are you still angry with me over that trivial life-saving incident? Julian, I always thought you were more mature and stable than Flynn. That's why I agreed to the family's proposal to marry you. In our world, isn't everything about weighing pros and cons? If you treat me like this, aren't you afraid I'll call off the wedding? As she finished, the hand turning the pages did indeed stop. Victoria saw this and smiled in satisfaction. She's just a lowly nanny. She's not as pretty as me, her body isn't as good, and don't even get me started on her family background. How can she compare to me in any way? I know you and Flynn were just temporarily seduced by her tricks. Before she could finish, the man threw the file in his hand at her. It hit her with such force that it left a small, bloody scratch on her cheek. Don't compare yourself to her. You're not worthy. For the past few days, besides searching for Aurora, Julian had also had someone investigate Victoria's life abroad. He hadn't exposed her schemes before because he didn't care. In their circle, it was common for married couples to have their own affairs. He could turn a blind eye. But now, he wanted to return to Aurora, clean and untainted. You certainly had a wild time abroad, Miss Vance. On your social media alone, you've posted photos with over 20 different boyfriends. The pictures are shockingly explicit. I wonder, if I were to release these, would your family be the first to call off the engagement, or would ours? Dozens of printed photos were scattered on the floor, interspersed with several abortion certificates. Victoria lost her balance and stumbled to the ground. She had deleted all of that. How could he have found it? Could Julian really go to such lengths for that nanny? Was he truly trying to cut ties with her? She couldn't let this information get out. For years, she had relied on her connection to Julian and Flynn to maintain her status in the Vance family. The Vances prioritized profit above all else. If she lost these two, she would likely never have a chance to recover. Worse, these photos would make it impossible for her to hold her head high ever again. The most dire consequence would be being married off to some fat, 50-something-year-old tycoon, just like the other useless, illegitimate daughters. A shiver ran down her spine. She scrambled to stuff the evidence back into her bag and put on a tearful expression. "Julian, let me explain. I was all alone abroad and was inevitably bullied. You weren't there for me. I had no choice but to accept their advances. They forced me to take those photos. Now that I'm back with you, can't we just let the past be the past?" Usually, this expression would have had him holding her and cooing softly. But now there was no pity in Julian's face, only coldness, distance, and a hint of disgust. "I'll ask you one more time. Who was it that saved us at the main Fletcher estate all those years ago? Answer me truthfully, and I'll give you the chance to break the engagement with your family yourself." The tears on Victoria's face froze. A venomous hatred flashed in her eyes. Of course, she knew who had saved them. That lingering, wretched ghost, Aurora Shaw. She could have just disappeared after pulling them out of the water, but no, she had to wait there, saying she wouldn't be at ease until she saw they were safe. In a fit of anger, Victoria had held her head underwater until she passed out. Just then, the Fletcher family's people had arrived. She had diverted their attention, blocking the view of the unconscious Aurora by the poolside. She took all the credit. But that bitch had appeared by Julian and Flynn's side again, taking her place. She just didn't want to get married so early. That didn't mean she was willing to share their affection. She, Victoria Vance, was the future lady of the Fletcher house. With this thought, her voice broke into a sob, and 2 streams of tears rolled down her cheeks. "I really don't remember. I was so scared something would happen to you and Flynn, I was desperately calling for help. I didn't see anyone else." Julian sneered, not bothering to expose her petty thoughts. "It doesn't matter if you won't cooperate, Miss Vance. I've already begun investigating the servants who were at the main estate that year. If there's nothing else, please leave." Victoria was about to say more, but she saw Julian pick up the phone on his desk. "Have security throw the person in my office out, and from now on, don't let her in again without my permission." Victoria could hardly believe her ears. Just a few days ago, he had summoned the country's best dermatologist for a tiny scratch on her hand. Now he looked at her as if she were a lifeless object. Soon, 2 security guards entered, flanked Victoria, and dragged her out. In front of everyone, Julian's actions were tantamount to throwing her dignity on the ground and stomping on it. As she was thrown out of the company building, a vicious glint appeared in Victoria's resentful eyes. On the 5th day of Aurora's absence, Flynn seemed to have lost his soul. He sat in a private room at a bar with his old pack of dissolute friends, downing glass after glass of high-proof vodka. He tried to numb himself with alcohol, as if that could make him forget that Aurora was gone. "Wow, Flynn's tolerance is getting better. I heard a rumor you were going crazy looking for some little nanny. Seeing you today, I guess the rumor was false," one of them slurred. "What kind of woman don't we have in our circle? For that little nanny to have both you and your brother so obsessed, she must be great in bed." A red-haired trust fund kid threw an arm around Flynn's shoulder. The next second, he was being pummeled to the ground. The private room filled with howls of pain. "Are you looking to die? Who gave you the right to talk about her?" The room fell silent. The other friends exchanged glances, unsure of what was happening. They didn't dare intervene, afraid of getting caught in Flynn's rampage. The one who had been beaten was barely breathing as he was dragged to a corner. Only then did they believe it. The recent rumors were all true. The Playboy's second, young Master Fletcher, had truly been tamed by a nameless little nanny. After Flynn had drunk so much he could no longer lift a bottle, he was sent home. He was still muttering to himself, "When I get back, Aurora's going to scold me for drinking so much." "It's fine. She can scold me." She can hit me, yell at me, whatever she wants as long as she forgives me. Aurora, where did you go? Why can't I find you anywhere? But only the empty echo of his own voice answered. Flynn stumbled from the living room to Aurora's room. He breathed in her lingering scent. Under the influence of alcohol, he remembered all the things he had done to her recently. He had thrown away the talisman she had prayed for him, called her a shameless gold digger, and cut her hands with a razor blade until they bled. With each memory, his heart felt like crushed fruit, and an endless wave of guilt and pain washed over him. Tears blurred Flynn's vision. He habitually bit his nails until all 10 fingers were bleeding. It was a symptom of his separation anxiety. After his sight returned, he had developed the condition, terrified that Aurora would leave him. He was dependent on the person who had stayed by his side when his world was nothing but darkness. At its worst, if Aurora was gone for even 10 minutes, he would start to hurt himself uncontrollably. Back then, Aurora would always dress his wounds with a pained expression, telling him over and over that she wouldn't leave. Aurora will never leave Flynn, unless one day you don't need me anymore. At that time, Flynn had silently vowed that he would always need her and would never give her a chance to leave. After all, the warmth Aurora gave him was something even Victoria couldn't compare to. But now, there was no one to frown while dressing his wounds, no one to blow on his hands to ease the sting, no one to hold him and gently pat his back to soothe him. She was truly angry with him. She didn't want him anymore. He had thought Aurora was just a substitute for Victoria, someone to pass the time with, someone to amuse him, and someone who could take care of him comfortably. Even if the old foxes of the Fletcher family called him good for nothing, so what? Aurora never looked down on him. She accepted all his flaws and stayed by his side. He couldn't deny that he had fallen for her. But the moment Victoria returned, he had habitually dropped Aurora and run to someone else. Flynn had thought that no matter what he did, Aurora would always be there waiting for him. After all, she was so good to him. But this time, she had left so decisively, without even a letter. He suddenly remembered leaving her alone at the party after Victoria's return. Was she as scared then as he was now? The day before the party, he had told her he had something important to say. He had planned to confess to her that day, to tell everyone that Aurora was the girl he loved. But how could he have forgotten? He had left her alone in that den of vipers. Flynn huddled in the corner of Aurora's room, clutching the unfinished gray scarf, and sobbed until his whole body shook. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Aurora, where in the world did you go?" After crying, his head cleared a little. He couldn't let her go. He had to find her. Even if she hit him, cursed him, or even killed him, he would take it. He had to atone for his sins. He just begged for one more look at her. Aurora was so good to him, maybe she would forgive him. Then he could give her a proper confession, his eyes filled with an unyielding obsession. "Aurora, wait for me. I will find you." Autumn in Switzerland was beautiful, so beautiful that Aurora couldn't find the words to describe it. Every step felt like walking into a Hayao Miyazaki film. Aurora rented a small cottage. The people were friendly, and sometimes she would be given a flower as she walked down the street. Speaking of flowers, the yard of her next-door neighbor was filled with them, so well tended it was clear they were lovingly cared for. However, the neighbor was a bit of a weirdo. She had tried to greet him several times, but he never responded. Though Aurora was good-natured, she didn't appreciate rudeness. The next morning, she had just gotten up to make breakfast when the doorbell rang. Opening the door, she saw a tall figure silhouetted against the light, completely blocking the exit. Aurora looked up at the man's face and was momentarily stunned. For the past few years, she had lived with Julian and Flynn, both of whom were exceptionally handsome and exuded an air of nobility. But the man before her was a completely different type. He was nearly 6'3", with broad shoulders and a strong build. He had a strikingly fine nose. Even though it was already autumn, he was wearing a white tank top, his powerful arms looking full of strength. But what was strange was that his bright, dark eyes stared at her blankly. He reminded Aurora of the term she'd seen online, a rugged gem. "My name is Leo Sterling. I heard you're also from our home country. My hearing aid was broken the last few days, so I couldn't come say hello. This morning, I saw the lavender on your windowsill had wilted, so I brought you some new ones." Leo scratched his head, a blush creeping up his ears as he looked at her. Aurora stared at the lavender, a little lost in thought. Lavender was her mother's favorite flower. When she was little, she knew her mother was already awake when she saw fresh lavender on the windowsill. Over time, she had gotten used to placing lavender by her window. It felt as if her mother was still with her. Aurora reached out to take the flowers and noticed the hearing aid behind his ear. She realized she had misjudged him. She felt a pang of guilt for having been so quick to label him. "Thank you, would you like to join me for breakfast?" Leo's eyes instantly lit up. He swallowed and stammered, "See, could I?" "Of course, I made some braised pork buns last night and some simple noodles with pork lard. If you don't mind, please join me." Aurora had been eating the local breakfast for a few days, but still found it not to her taste, so she had decided to cook for herself. Flynn had been a picky eater, and in order to take good care of him, her cooking skills had been forced to improve. Now, she could fend for herself even in a foreign country. Although Aurora was confident in her cooking, she was still shocked to see Leo devour 5 fist-sized pork buns in a row. After he had eaten his fill and let out a small burp, he saw her watching him from across the table, and his face immediately turned red. "I'm sorry. It's just been so long since I've had such delicious food. I couldn't help myself. As a thank you, I'll bring you fresh flowers every day." Aurora didn't mind. She had cooked countless meals at the Fletcher villa and had never received a single compliment. When she first started caring for the brothers, if anything was even slightly not to Flynn's taste, he would mercilessly belittle her and pour the food over her head. The phrase she heard most often was, "This tastes worse than pig slop." Those years had ground her self-esteem into dust, leaving only a shell that operated on their whims. Later, when things got better, she survived on the scraps of warmth they occasionally threw her way, clinging to them for hope. Now that she had left them, Aurora felt an unprecedented sense of freedom. She could eat what she liked, take long walks, draw, listen to music. She loved this life. "It's no problem. I'm glad you enjoyed it. But if you come again, please let me know in advance so I can make more." There was a hint of laughter in Aurora's voice, which lightened the mood. Leo looked at the girl across the table, momentarily dazed. The blush that had started at his ears began to spread. "If you ever need help with anything, you have to tell me." Aurora didn't refuse. She thought for a moment and said, "If you have time, would you be my tour guide?" "Of course. It would be my honor." After he left, Aurora cleared the dishes and opened the diary her mother had left her. It was filled with detailed notes and descriptions of Switzerland. Line after line recorded her mother's beautiful longing for this place. But toward the end, the entries became fewer and fewer. Flipping to the last page, her hand stopped at the final sentence. "Walter Shaw, didn't you promise you would come back and take little fish and me to Switzerland? How did you end up telling 2 lies at once?" Finding her plan with Julian unworkable, Victoria Vance turned to Flynn. For years, everyone in their circle knew that Flynn chased after her, which had given her an immense sense of vanity. But she also knew that Flynn had no interest in controlling the Fletcher family, making him a poor long-term prospect. Now that her engagement to Julian was off, she figured she might as well settle for Flynn. It was better than waking up one day in the bed of some old man. She pushed open the door to the Fletcher house and was immediately hit by the overwhelming smell of smoke and alcohol, forcing her to step back. Seeing the figure on the sofa, she pinched her nose and went inside. "Flynn, I just found out where Aurora is. I thought about it and decided I should tell you." Victoria bit her lower lip, feigning a troubled expression. The name Aurora was like a trigger. Flynn shot up from the sofa and grabbed her arm. "Where is she?" Victoria took a few photos from her bag and placed them in front of him, sighing theatrically. "Someone took these and gave them to me. I guess Aurora realized she couldn't climb into the Fletcher family, so after all these years of wasted effort, she just moved on to someone else. We've seen plenty of women like her, so it's not surprising. But I really don't want to see you waste away over someone like that." Flynn held the photos, which showed a woman with a figure and profile 7 or 8 parts similar to Aurora's, arm in arm with a pot-bellied man entering a hotel. He flipped through them, ignoring Victoria's words. "These past few days back home, I've done some thinking," she continued. "The person I love is still you. I'll be canceling the engagement with Julian, and we can be together properly from now on." As she spoke, Victoria leaned toward him, trying to take his arm. Suddenly, Flynn cut her off. "This isn't Aurora." The woman in the photos had a similar build, back, and even profile. But during the time Flynn was blind, he had traced Aurora's face with his hands countless times. He knew her features better than anyone. He couldn't be mistaken. He tossed the photos into the trash without a second thought and turned to Victoria. "It was my fault for not seeing my own heart clearly before. After Aurora left, I realized she is the only person I will ever love. Don't come looking for me anymore. If Aurora comes back and sees you, she might misunderstand, and she'll never forgive me. You should go." Without another glance at her, he went back to clutching the scarf and closed his eyes to rest. Victoria's nails dug into her palms so hard they nearly drew blood. Her eyes burned with a deep, consuming hatred. She cursed Aurora 1,000 times in her heart, wishing she would receive news of her death. Why had they all changed just because Aurora left? Their love was supposed to be hers alone. She wouldn't accept this. Flynn, not hearing her leave, opened his eyes and frowned. Victoria was unbuttoning her blouse, revealing a black bra underneath. With red-rimmed eyes, she walked slowly toward him. "Flynn, you're just not over her yet. I can help you move on. Let me give myself to you, okay? Anything Aurora can do, I can do too." The moment she got close, Flynn shoved her away. "Don't touch me. Aurora wouldn't like it." He recoiled several steps, his face filled with genuine disgust. "And don't you dare presume to know her. She never did anything like this with me." The force of the push sent Victoria sprawling to the floor. She clutched her chest in humiliation. "Are you insane? Treating me like this for a lowly nanny? So what if you can't find her? So what if she's dead?" Flynn grabbed his jacket from the sofa and threw it over her. "For old time's sake, I'll let this slide," he said coldly. "But you know I'm no gentleman. If I hear you say something like that again, don't blame me for getting rough with a woman. Now get out." Just then, his phone on the sofa began to ring. Flynn saw it was an unknown number. He declined it once, but it rang again. "Hello, is this Mr. Fletcher? Who is this?" "I'm calling from the Happy Hands Craft Studio. A Miss Aurora Shaw commissioned a handmade piece from us half a month ago. It's ready, but we can't reach her. You're listed as her emergency contact." Hearing this, Flynn was already moving swiftly toward the door, his face a mask of urgency. "There's also a letter. It was supposed to be placed inside the gift box, but the box she ordered is out of stock. Would you like to choose a different one for us to put it in?" Flynn's hand holding the phone trembled. He prayed. Maybe Aurora was just playing a joke on him. Maybe she was hiding to prepare the surprise. "No, don't. I'm on my way now." Victoria watched Flynn's retreating back, her face ashen. She had lost her final bargaining chip. When Flynn arrived at the craft studio, he found that Julian was already there. They met, both looking disheveled and worn. Though Julian's exterior was composed, the exhaustion in his eyes was undeniable. Flynn was even worse. Aurora used to iron his clothes meticulously and coordinate his outfits. Now a scruffy beard was growing in, and his clothes were a wrinkled mess. Soon, the owner came out with a box. He handed the letter to Julian. Flynn opened the box and saw 3 small ceramic figures inside. Aurora stood in the middle, her eyes curved into a smile. Flynn was on one side, arms crossed with a grumpy frown. On the other side, Julian was expressionless, save for a slight upturn of his lips. His gaze moved downward. Words were carved into the base. Aurora's little family. Looking at the ceramic figures, Flynn's eyes instantly reddened. Aurora had truly seen them as family, had treated them with a sincere heart. But what had they done? They had hurt her until she was covered in wounds and forced her to leave. How much pain must she have been in on the day she left? Julian's eyes also grew red. He carefully opened the envelope and read the contents, word for word. To Julian and Flynn, "I've actually wanted to call you by your names for a long time. The 5-year contract is almost up, so please forgive me for being so bold this once. After the contract ends, I'll be able to interact with you as an equal. We'll be a real family then, right? I'll make Flynn's favorite braised prawns and a pot of Julian's favorite seafood congee to celebrate. If it's okay, could we get a kitten later? When you're out, I can hold it while I wait for you to come home. Finally, Aurora really wants to be with you forever." By the end of the letter, Julian's hands were trembling. Aurora had genuinely wanted to spend her life with them. What kind of monsters were they to have lost such a kind and gentle girl? As a heavy silence filled the air, Julian's phone rang. The caller ID showed it was the private investigator he had hired. "Mr. Fletcher, we've found a trace of Miss Shaw. She boarded a flight to Switzerland a week ago. After landing, she took a local bus to Grindelwald, where she is currently renting a house." Hearing this news, both brothers were jolted, a mixture of shock and joy washing over them. She had gone abroad. No wonder they couldn't find any clues in the country. He had even started to fear the worst, that some accident had befallen her. Aurora's social circle used to be so simple he knew what she was doing at almost any given time. He never imagined she would have the courage to go abroad alone. Had she been so disappointed in them that she chose to hide from them in another country? Whatever the reason, this time, he would not let her leave him again. With the same thought in their minds, they left the pottery shop without a moment's delay and rushed to the airport. Over the next few days, Leo took Aurora to every place mentioned in her mother's diary. She stood in awe of the Alps and marveled at the clarity of Lake Brience. At each spot, Leo would take a photo of her and tuck it into the diary. "Aurora, hold still. The light is beautiful right now." There he was again, tirelessly taking pictures of her. At times like this, Aurora felt like she was the center of his world. The feeling of being so cherished and cared for by someone made her a little uneasy, but mostly it brought her joy. With him, she always felt the sun, the grass, and the gentle breeze. It was comfortable, as if he were healing all her old wounds. After taking the photo, Leo handed her the camera, not even bothering to wipe the sweat from his brow. "You look so beautiful today. You outshine the scenery." Aurora felt a little embarrassed. Perhaps because Leo had grown up abroad, his compliments were always direct and sincere. He often made her blush without even realizing it. "Thank you. The photos are wonderful." Aurora smiled as she flipped through the pictures. A gentle breeze blew, messing up a few strands of her hair. Leo stared, captivated, and instinctively reached out to tuck the hair behind her ear. His touch startled her. She looked up. Their eyes met and both of them froze. "Don't be angry. Your hair was just messy. I just wanted to help." Leo explained hastily, afraid she would think him a libertine and start to dislike him. But remembering the moment, his face flushed red again. After her shyness passed, Aurora composed herself. "It's okay. Let's keep going." Leo felt his heart was about to burst from his chest. In this beautiful scenery, with the person he liked standing right in front of him, he uncontrollably took a step forward and spoke softly, "Aurora, I like you." Aurora's eyes widened as she looked at the earnest and nervous man before her. Having said it, Leo also felt a little self-conscious. He ran his hands through his hair and stammered, "I know we haven't known each other for long, and it's sudden to say this, but I'm serious. I have a lot of flowers in my garden. I take care of them every day, thinking that one day I would give them all to someone I love. After meeting you, my garden finally has a reason to exist. I know I have a hearing impairment. It's okay if you don't accept me. Just let me stay by your side like this." Over the past few days, Aurora had sensed it to some degree. Leo had accompanied her on so many journeys, always paying attention to her, taking care of her. It was the first time she had ever received such warm and direct kindness. So this is what it feels like to be cared for. Back at the Fletcher house, she had always been the one giving, loving them the way her mother had loved her. She couldn't deny that she had felt something for them at certain times. But their unequal status had made her never dare to dream, and she had never received any positive affirmation. Leo was a warm person, and she was indeed attracted to someone so warm. But it was still a little difficult for her to jump into a relationship right now. "Leo, I'm sorry, but I can't give you an answer right away." Hearing her words, Leo's shoulders visibly slumped and his eyelashes drooped. Aurora found him a little adorable, like a golden retriever. Her voice held a hint of a smile as she added, "But we can try to get to know each other first. Let things happen naturally, okay?" If Leo had a tail, it would probably be wagging furiously right now. A brilliant light shone in his eyes. He excitedly pulled her into a hug. "Thank you for giving me a chance, Aurora." The sudden movement startled her. She was about to pull away when she saw two figures running toward them in the distance. Her pupils contracted. She was too shocked to even struggle. By the time the men arrived and one of them punched Leo to the ground, she had finally reacted and taken 2 steps back. Her eyes were wide with terror as she looked at them. Her body trembled uncontrollably as a powerful force pulled her into an embrace. "Aurora, I finally found you. Come back with me, okay? Back to our home." Leo, caught off guard, saw Aurora being held by a strange man and instantly flared up. He tried to stand, but another man blocked his path. Julian and Flynn stood opposite him, flanking Aurora with an intensely possessive stance. "Who are you?" Neither man answered him. Their eyes remained fixed on her, as if afraid she would vanish from their sight again in the next second. When Aurora came to her senses, she struggled wildly to break free, her eyes cold. "Let go of me." Her expression stung them, but they didn't loosen their grip in the slightest. Aurora looked at them coldly, her voice devoid of any warmth. "That's not my home. Please leave immediately." Her words provoked Flynn. He tightened his grip on her hand. "Aurora, don't say things you don't mean. I know you're angry with us. You can hit me, curse me, anything you want. When we get back, you can punish me however you like. But I will never let you leave my side again." Aurora pushed with all her might but couldn't break free. She had no choice but to appeal to Leo for help. "Leo, get me out of here." Leo, who had assumed they were acquaintances of Aurora, heard the plea from the woman he loved and, without a second thought, charged at the two men. He was strong from years of manual labor, but he was no match for two against one. Even as he was losing, he continued to shield Aurora behind him. "Don't be afraid. I'll get you out of here." Aurora's sharp eyes noticed that Leo's hearing aid had fallen out, and a trickle of blood was coming from his ear. A wave of guilt washed over her. She pushed his protective hands away, took a step forward, and said firmly, "I'm not leaving with you. The contract is over. We have nothing to do with each other anymore. I've already called the police. You are deliberately causing a disturbance. If you don't want to be deported, you should leave now. Aurora, I know you're still angry. You wanted a home of your own, didn't you? I saw the ceramic figures you made, and I read the letter. Let us give you a home, okay? We'll never be apart again." Flynn's voice was cautious, yet his gaze on her was stubborn. Aurora took a deep breath, took Leo's hand, and said slowly, "I'm sorry, but I have a new life now, and I have someone I want to cherish. Let the past be the past. As I said, we owe each other nothing, and there's no need to see each other again." Julian's eyes darkened as he watched their clasped hands, a storm gathering in his gaze. "Aurora, the one who saved us at the main Fletcher estate back then. It was you, wasn't it?" Aurora froze. The memories buried deep in her heart surged forth. She could never forget the suffocating, near-death feeling of being held underwater. It was a shadow she never wanted to revisit. Even Flynn looked at Julian in disbelief, a spark of hope in his eyes. It was Aurora? So, it was her all along. "That doesn't matter anymore," Aurora said flatly. "Just because of that life-saving grace, you let Victoria Vance bully and humiliate me. And now that you've found out the truth, you chase me here and expect me to go back. Am I a dog you can just summon and dismiss at will? Go away. I'm not going back with you." Just as she finished speaking, police sirens sounded in the distance. Leo held her hand tightly and walked toward the approaching police car. "Don't be afraid. I'll get you out of here." Aurora nodded, gripping Leo's hand tightly as she left with him. Julian and Flynn stared after them, their eyes filled with an unyielding obsession. Aurora took Leo back to her cottage and sat on the sofa, dabbing ointment on the scrapes on his face. Feeling her gentle touch, Leo felt the sting of his wounds lessen and his heart filled with sweetness. After the sweetness, however, came a wave of unease. Those two men from earlier, who were they? Aurora's hand paused. She didn't hide the truth. They were my former employers back home. I used to be their caretaker. After the contract ended, I had no other ties, so I came to Switzerland to fulfill my mother's wish. But the way they looked at you, it didn't seem like a simple employer-employee relationship. Aurora paused, then gave a self-deprecating laugh. I once had the same misunderstanding. She held out her hand, revealing the scars. Her voice was calm. I've already paid a painful price to see the reality of the situation. Besides, I'm quite happy now. For the first time, I've discovered how wonderful it is to live for myself. Leo looked at the scars on her hand, some deep, some shallow, all tinged with a faint pink that showed they had only recently healed. His heart ached. He reached out and gently stroked them, his voice firm. From now on, I won't let anyone hurt you. The warmth of his hand on her scars startled Aurora. Her face grew hot and she pulled her hand back. Their eyes met and she saw the seriousness in his. A warm current flowed through her. Thank you, Leo. An ambiguous atmosphere lingered between them. Aurora thought that perhaps it was only a matter of time before she fell for Leo. A person so warm and sincere was a rare find in this world. Leo insisted on escorting Aurora to her door, reminding her to lock her doors and windows. "If those two come to harass you again, you must call me." Aurora nodded obediently and urged him to go home. So much had happened that day. Lying in bed that night, she couldn't sleep. The day's events replayed in her mind like a slideshow. Why had Julian and Flynn chased her all the way to Switzerland? In their eyes, she was just a nanny. Was it necessary to drop everything back home and come here to beg for her forgiveness? Thinking it over, she remembered what Julian had said about the life-saving grace. For her, that incident was the source of her aquaphobia, a trauma she had buried deep and never wanted to speak of. She certainly hadn't expected them to remember something from so many years ago. If they had come all this way just for that, it seemed far too dramatic. She had been firm with them today, giving them no face at all. Proud as they were, they would surely have gone straight back home. Good, she thought. Aurora had a restless night. The next morning, she was awakened by a commotion outside. She peeked through the curtain and saw that new neighbors were moving in down the street. Now wide awake, Aurora decided to make breakfast. Just as the food was nearly ready, the doorbell rang. Assuming it was Leo coming for breakfast, Aurora opened the door without a second thought. But standing on her doorstep was Flynn. "What are you doing here?" Hearing Aurora's distant and cold tone, the smile that had been on Flynn's face immediately froze. Aurora never used to speak to him like that. But the feeling of loss lasted only a moment. He lowered his gaze, his voice hoarse. "Aurora, my stomach hurts. I can't get used to the food here." Aurora was stunned for a moment. She knew how picky Flynn was, but she wasn't their nanny anymore. Even if he starved to death, it had nothing to do with her. "Then you should go back home. Our employment relationship is over. I have no obligation to take care of you." Is an employment relationship all we ever had? Flynn raised his voice, stepping forward and grabbing her shoulders, desperate for confirmation. Aurora frowned, her patience wearing thin. Being woken up early had already soured her mood, and Flynn's appearance only made it worse. She took a deep breath, pried his hands off her shoulders, and took a step back. "Right now, we are strangers with no employment relationship at all." Flynn's face went pale. He sounded lost. "Aurora, don't look at me like that. I am grateful that you and Julian gave me a job for 5 years, which allowed me to pay for my mother's medical bills. I was out of line before and I offended Miss Vance. I'm sorry. Please, don't disturb my life anymore." Flynn felt as if he had been struck dumb. He stood rooted to the spot, his voice choked. "Don't apologize. I was the one who was wrong. Aurora, you did nothing wrong." Hearing Flynn say this, Aurora felt a sense of surreal displacement. How she had once longed to hear those words from him, but now she no longer cared. Just then, a voice came from behind Flynn. "What are you doing here?" Leo stood a short distance away, a bouquet of fresh lavender in his arms, frowning at Flynn. He walked forward, positioning himself in front of Aurora, and handed her the flowers. "Just pick them this morning. I'll help you put them in a vase later." Aurora took them with practiced ease, the scent of lavender soothing her frayed nerves. She looked at the two men facing off outside her door and sighed. "Both of you come in." With that, she disappeared into the kitchen. Leo shot Flynn a hostile look before following her. "Are you sure you don't want me to get rid of him?" Aurora's hand, washing the dishes, paused. She said lightly, "I know him. He's the type who won't give up until he gets what he wants. If I kick him out, he'll just be back. Then I'll kick him out every time he comes." Leo made a fist and threw a few punches in the air. Aurora laughed, amused by his antics. "Why are you already acting like my boyfriend when we aren't even together yet?" she blurted out. The words hung in the air. Both of them froze, then blushed. Flynn walked into the living room and saw the two of them working together seamlessly in the kitchen. A sour feeling washed over him. For so many years, he had complacently accepted her kindness. Now, she looked happier than ever. At the dining table, Flynn watched them chat happily, a bitter taste in his mouth. "He calls you Aurora. Can I call you that too?" Aurora ignored his question and asked one of her own. "When are you going back?" "I plan to stay here for a while. I can go with you wherever you want to go from now on." "I'm sorry, but that's not necessary. Leo will be with me. You're already disrupting my life." Just as Flynn was about to say something, the doorbell rang again. Leo felt a headache coming on. Why had a pleasant breakfast turned into a battlefield? He opened the door to find Julian standing there. Julian's eyes first landed on Leo, darkening for a moment. Then he saw Flynn sitting inside and his expression returned to normal. Facing Julian, Aurora wasn't as resolute as she had been with Flynn. But she had no intention of getting entangled with him again either. She pointed at Flynn. "Are you here for him? Good, take him with you. If either of you show up at my door again, I'll report you for harassment." Julian didn't even spare Flynn a glance. He was a thoughtful man and knew that pestering Aurora would get him nowhere. This time, he had come prepared. "No, I'm here for you. Aurora, I'm sorry, but I had your past investigated. The man your mother wanted to see again, your father. I found him for you." Aurora had, in fact, thought about looking for the man her mother had obsessed over in the diary. She knew he was her father, but she had never met him and had no way of finding him. And now, someone was telling her he had been found. Aurora's body trembled uncontrollably, her mind a chaotic mess. She didn't know how to describe her feelings. "He's waiting for you at the cafe down the street. Shall we go together?" Aurora bit her lip, but she nodded and followed him out. Leo, seeing her distraught state, grew worried and followed them. But Julian stopped him outside the cafe. His voice, no longer warm and gentle, carried the oppressive air of a superior. "You don't need to worry about Aurora's affairs. I'll be taking her back home to care for her soon." Leo ignored the implication. "You have no right to decide for Aurora," he said calmly. Julian glanced at him, then down at his hearing aid, his meaning clear. "I understand your intentions. After all, Aurora is more beautiful than anything in this world. When a man freezing in the cold finally grasps the sun, it's hard to let go. Especially," he added, "a cripple like you." He turned to look at Aurora, who had just sat down inside, a gentle, unyielding look in his eyes. "But I was the one who caught her first, so I won't give her up to anyone." With that, he walked into the cafe and sat down beside her. Aurora looked at the elegant man before her. There was a faint resemblance in their features. He wore a navy blue casual suit and gold-rimmed glasses. His eyes held a gentle wisdom that seemed to have been honed by time, as if he had never weathered any major storms in his life. She thought, dazed, of her mother's hands, weathered by hardship, which would crack and swell with painful chilblains every winter. "Aurora, I am your father, Walter Shaw." Aurora felt uncomfortable. She just nodded. "Hello." Walter seemed to sense her distance. He chuckled. "You look so much like your mother. Especially your eyes." She had eyes that knew how to love. At the mention of her mother, a wave of sadness washed over Aurora. She desperately wanted to ask the man before her why he had never come back to see her mother, not even once. Her mother had been thinking of him until the very end, wanting to come to Switzerland to ask him herself. "Aurora, I failed to be a father to you. I have no face to see your mother." "All these years, why didn't you come back?" Walter paused, as if the words were difficult to say, but he said them anyway. "I came to Switzerland with a project team. One of the female researchers pursued me. I rejected her at first, but in a foreign country, one can get lonely. Then, one night I got drunk. She became pregnant. I had to be responsible for her." The more Aurora heard, the colder her heart grew. "You were responsible for her," she said, her voice choked. "So what about my mother? Who was responsible for her?" She remembered how her mother had never seemed to stop working, just to send her to school. She would wake up before dawn to help at a breakfast stall, doing every dirty and tiring job imaginable. She would often come home exhausted long after Aurora was asleep. Life got a little better after they went to the Fletcher estate, but she could still only do menial labor. Because she had a child with her, she had endured countless scornful looks and whispers. Even if you had just sent her a letter to put an end to her hopes, that would have been better. Why was there no word from you for all these years? By the end, Aurora was sobbing, unable to speak. Her mother had suffered so much, always waiting for this man to come back and see her one more time. But he never came, and she died with that regret. Walter was silent, his voice dry. I didn't have the face to tell her. Aurora took a deep breath, trying to stop the tears from falling. "So, why are you here to see me today?" Walter glanced at Julian and said slowly, "I know I failed as a father and have no right to say this, but after your mother passed away, you had no one else to rely on. When Mr. Fletcher approached me today, I learned that you already have a man you can depend on. That puts my mind at ease. Mr. Fletcher is a young and promising man. When you two get married, I can finally rest assured." A sudden chill washed over Aurora. The scene was too absurd. Her father, who had abandoned his wife and daughter, suddenly appeared and, in the tone of an elder, entrusted her to another man. What right did he have? Aurora turned to Julian, her voice flat. "You want to marry me?" A flicker of hope ignited in Julian's eyes. His voice, usually calm and composed, was unsteady. "Aurora, I love you." Aurora suddenly burst out laughing. "And what about Victoria Vance? I've already broken off the engagement with her. And for everything she's done to you, I'll help you get revenge if you want." Julian's eyes were filled with sincerity and urgency, as if he would do anything for her if she just nodded. But Aurora felt no stirrings of affection, only a sense of profound absurdity. A shattered mirror cannot be made whole again just by gluing the pieces back together. After being hurt time and time again, the genuine feelings she had once offered had long since vanished. She had finally let everything go and was ready to start anew, but the very people who had hurt her were now chasing her down, begging for forgiveness, claiming they loved her. It was all ridiculously comical. Both Julian and Flynn. She wanted nothing more to do with either of them. Inappropriately, her thoughts drifted to Leo, the man who had never schemed against her, who had always stood by her side, quietly giving her strength. "I'm sorry, but the play you're acting out is terrible," Aurora said to Julian, her voice cold. "I have no interest in watching." She then turned to her father. "And thank you for helping me see what a thoroughly rotten man my father is. You, them, Victoria, I will forgive none of you." With that, Aurora turned and walked away without looking back. Outside the cafe, Leo was standing by the door, waiting for her as always. The sun shone through his hair, enveloping him in light. As he approached, her heart skipped a beat. Seeing her emerge, Leo immediately asked with concern, his eyes scanning her up and down. He only relaxed when he saw she was unharmed. A phrase came to her mind: "You should love someone who is already a good person." Aurora thought Leo was just such a person. She heard her own voice. "Leo, will you be my boyfriend?" Leo froze for a moment, then his eyes lit up with surprise. He fumbled, wanting to take her hand but fearing he was overstepping. "Aurora, are you serious?" Aurora heard the hesitation in his voice and understood his concern. She stepped forward and placed her hand in his. "I'm not doing this to spite them. It's true that I might have had feelings for them in the past, but those insignificant affections were worn away by the hurt they caused me time and again." Leo hugged her, his heart aching for her. "I wish I had met you sooner. It's not too late now." Hand in hand, they disappeared down the street. Julian had never been more keenly aware of the truth. Aurora would never forgive him. He had thought that finding her father would win him some favor in her heart, but he was wrong. He didn't even have the courage to chase after her. Walter Shaw, seeing the soulless Julian, spoke in an obsequious tone. "Mr. Fletcher, I did as you asked. I can't help it if Aurora won't acknowledge me as her father. The project funding you promised." About that, hearing Walter's words, Julian suddenly laughed, a sharp, unhinged sound. He lost his composure and violently kicked the table toward the other man. He shouldn't have brought him here. He knew Aurora's gentle strength. Why would she care about a man who was her father in biology only? Besides, the man was utterly despicable. "Get out!" Walter's face turned ugly for a moment, but he scurried away. He had forgotten the woman back home years ago. If it weren't for Julian's status, he never would have come to play the part of a long-lost father. After Walter left, Julian called his assistant. "Investigate Walter Shaw. Make sure he never has a chance to get back on his feet." How could he win Aurora back? Every method he could think of seemed to fail with her. Julian was lost. His shoulders slumped. He didn't even notice Flynn sitting across from him. "The family just called," Flynn said. "They're going to announce the marriage alliance with the Vance family. They want us back immediately." Julian laughed, a vicious glint in his eye. She really isn't afraid to die. If she wants to stir up a storm, she can't blame the storm for swallowing her whole. The two brothers immediately packed their things, leaving a letter at Aurora's door. The next day, when Aurora found it, she merely glanced at the names, then tore it to shreds and threw it in the trash. In the distance, Leo stood with his camera, waving to her. Upon their return, Julian and Flynn were immediately escorted by Fletcher family members back to the main estate. Victoria sat on the sofa, her eyes red, looking like the victim of a great injustice. Bartholomew Fletcher, the family patriarch, though in his 60s, exuded the intimidating aura of a man long in power. You two unfilial sons abandoning the Fletcher group to chase a nanny all the way abroad. Have you no shame? Victoria quickly went to comfort him, her voice choked. Julian and Flynn were just temporarily bewitched by that woman. Don't be angry, grandfather. The three of us grew up together. I'm sure they'll come to their senses. He hurled a teacup at Julian, who sidestepped it. Julian, who had always been obedient to his grandfather, stood silently, a first-time display of rebellion. Enraged, Mr. Fletcher SR slammed his cane on the floor. One of you must marry Vicky, I don't care which one. The wedding is in 3 days, you have no right to refuse. Flynn couldn't hold back any longer. He stood up, disgusted. I'd rather die than marry a vicious and promiscuous woman like her. Victoria had already covered her tracks regarding her time abroad. Besides, the Fletcher family just needed a marriage alliance. It didn't matter with whom. This was her last chance. In the past few days, she had been curating stories of her childhood with the brothers online, crafting an image of them as childhood sweethearts. Many netizens lauded their pure love amidst the deceit of the wealthy, and the stock prices of both family companies had even risen. The internet was abuzz with polls on who Victoria would ultimately marry. The day Mr. Fletcher SR had come looking for her, she knew her plan had succeeded. So what if they despised her? In their world, marriage was inextricably linked with benefits. Julian stood up, his voice heavy. If I must marry her, then I'd rather not be a Fletcher. Before, the struggle for power in the Fletcher family was like a program written into his DNA. He had to accept everything the family arranged. But now, it all suddenly felt meaningless. If power could bring Aurora back to him, he would gladly give it all up. With that thought, Julian bowed to his grandfather and left the main estate. Flynn looked at Victoria's increasingly ugly expression and laughed mockingly. I was never interested in the Fletcher family's assets anyway. I'm curious to see who you'll be marrying in 3 days, Miss Vance. With that, he also walked out. Behind them, unseen, the hatred in Victoria's eyes threatened to consume her. The next day, a storm erupted online. Victoria changed her tune from sweet reminiscences to outright slander. She posted a photo of Aurora, claiming she was a homewrecker nanny trying to marry up. With the groundwork she had laid, a legion of warriors immediately rose to her defense, viciously attacking Aurora online. The scandal became so big it even spread to international social media. Julian tried several times to suppress the trending topic, but the Fletcher family's interference thwarted his efforts. When Flynn saw the posts, he tried calling Victoria repeatedly, but she hung up on him. She only sent him one text message: I expect a groom at the altar in 3 days. Flynn furiously smashed his phone on the ground. Julian, seeing the message before the screen went dark, gave a sarcastic smile. She wants a groom, does she? Then I'll give her one. At first, when Aurora saw she had become a reviled homewrecker online, she was confused. She read through all of Victoria's posts. After understanding the situation, she closed the page unfazed. Leo watched her expression carefully, relieved to see she genuinely didn't care. Seeing him, Aurora burst out laughing and threw herself into his arms. The people online are saying such awful things about me. Aren't you afraid I really am a failed homewrecker? From what I can see, the ones who failed are the 2 who scurried back home. I was lucky enough to win your affection. Why would I believe this ridiculous gossip? Besides, if you really did like money and I happen to have it, then I'd be very happy. His words confused her. Don't you make a living selling flowers? Where would you get money? Leo slapped his forehead, as if just remembering. Oh, I forgot to tell you. My family has a business in Switzerland. My older brother runs the company. I don't have much ambition, so I just live off stock dividends. It's about 100 million or so a year. Now, Aurora was truly stunned. She had thought Leo was just an ordinary small-town resident. She never imagined he was a hidden trust fund kid. Then your ears? What happened? Leo subconsciously touched his ear, looking down sheepishly. A few years ago, I was into extreme sports. I had an accident while skiing on a mountain. But don't worry. Now that I have you, I'll never touch those dangerous things again. I have to take good care of you, give you a home. A warmth spread through Aurora's chest. She was willing to believe again, because Leo was worth it. 3 days later, the wedding was held as scheduled. Victoria was a nervous wreck. If they really didn't show up, her reputation would be ruined, and she would never be able to hold her head high again. But they cared so much about Aurora, they wouldn't just ignore this. She had already told them she would clear things up as long as the wedding took place. The time was drawing near, but they still hadn't arrived. Mr. Fletcher, SR, sat at the main table, his mood as dark as a thundercloud. They're here, they're here. With the shout from outside, a swarm of media rushed forward. They relentlessly snapped photos of the figures appearing at the entrance of the grand hall. So the online rumors were true, both of them came. Are they here to fight for the bride? So romantic, I ship it. I wonder which one Miss Vance will choose. Victoria saw the two men approaching and a smile bloomed on her face, but in the next second she froze. A private investigator followed them in and, unnoticed, plugged a USB drive into the large screen that was playing music. Instantly, all the media cameras turned, swiveling to film the explosive content on the screen. A series of scandalous moans and sounds filled the hall as a slideshow of photos and videos showing Victoria entangled with various men played on a loop. The blood drained from Victoria's face. She lunged at the screen like a madwoman, trying to cover it. Don't shoot, stop filming. I deleted all of this, how can it still exist? Her small frame was useless against the massive screen. Her frantic face was juxtaposed with the face of the woman in the videos, driving the media into an even greater frenzy. I can't believe the eldest daughter of the Vance family is so wild. So Mr. Fletcher and the second young master knew her true colors all along. This is explosive, it's definitely going to be the headline, but why release this now? Could it be that the little nanny is their true love, and this is their way of protecting her? This is like a modern-day Cinderella story, but with two princes. I just wonder where Cinderella is now. Julian and Flynn watched the scene unfold with cold eyes. Was this how Aurora felt at the piano recital, surrounded and humiliated by everyone? Now, it was simply karma. As the crowd murmured, Mr. Fletcher, SR, his face ashen, nearly fainted from anger. He never imagined that the ever-compliant Julian could do something so damaging to the Fletcher family's reputation. He was helped to his feet and, staggering forward, viciously struck both men with his cane. Again and again, the blows were heavy. You two unfilial sons, get out. Hearing this, Flynn pushed himself up and, without a second thought, turned and left. Now that Victoria was dealt with, he couldn't wait to see Aurora. He wanted to tell her that whether she forgave him or not, he would stay by her side. Julian looked at the white-haired old man, a flicker of pity in his heart, but still, he bowed deeply. I'm sorry, grandfather. Then he got into the same car as Flynn and headed for the airport. They exchanged a look, both seeing the determination in the other's eyes. On the way to the airport, traffic sped past. Flynn, desperate to see Aurora again, pressed down on the accelerator. He didn't notice a black car following them, accelerating to over 110 miles per hour and charging straight at them. The driver was Victoria. Julian and Flynn had destroyed everything she had. Thinking of the bleak, hopeless future ahead, she had run from the crowd and chased after their car. Hatred boiled within her, her eyes wild with madness. Why did they get to just walk away after everything they had done? The three of them were supposed to have grown up together, but because of one woman, they had ruined everything. If that's the case, let's all die together. With that thought, she floored the accelerator, turned the car around, and slammed into them head-on. Flynn didn't have time to brake. The sudden impact caught him completely off guard. He could only swerve, but the force of the collision still sent their car spinning and rolling. The front was completely caved in, the windows shattered. Despite the airbags, both Julian and Flynn were severely injured and knocked unconscious. Victoria's car was impaled on a steel barrier. The fuel tank ruptured on impact. She didn't have the strength to climb out, her eyes filled with a crazed obsession. We promised we would always be together. Blood poured from her wounds. The fuel tank suddenly ignited, and flames quickly engulfed the entire car. The Fletcher and Vance families were thrown into chaos. Stock prices plummeted. Both families were overwhelmed, and the Vances were investigated for Victoria's deliberate act. One dead, two injured. Julian's legs were mangled in the crushed front of the car, aggravating his old injuries. He required reconstructive surgery. But when he woke up, he thrashed about like a madman, trying to drag his injured legs out of bed. It took 4 or 5 bodyguards and a sedative to restrain him. Every time he regained consciousness, he would repeat the same words. Aurora. I have to find Aurora. Flynn suffered multiple injuries. A piece of the shattered windshield had left a gash on his hand, so deep it exposed the bone. He lay in his hospital bed, looking at the densely stitched wound, and cried silent tears. So this is how much it hurts. When he had dragged Aurora's hand across the razor blades, was she in this much pain? Did he even have the right to seek her forgiveness? Half a month later, before being discharged, Flynn went to see Julian. He looked at the lifeless figure in the wheelchair. "I'm going to see her one more time," he said, "even if it's just from a distance." Julian hung his head and gave a self-mocking smile. Even with surgery, his legs would never fully recover. He would likely walk with a limp for the rest of his life. How could he face Aurora like this? She had seen him at his most vulnerable before. But this time, he had brought this upon himself. Aurora would never again be there to apply hot compresses, make him congee, or stand before him, ready to catch him when he fell. An endless sorrow spread through Julian's eyes, and tears streamed down his neck. He no longer had the right to stand before her. When Flynn arrived in Switzerland, he disguised himself completely and watched Aurora's house from a distance. But he waited for an entire day and saw no one come out. He tried asking a neighbor, but the person, suspicious of his strange behavior, quickly left. He had no choice but to find the landlord of the house he had rented. "The young lady you're looking for." She left with Mr. Sterling, the man with the garden full of flowers. They said they were going on a round-the-world honeymoon. They registered their marriage not long ago and even gave us wedding candy, according to tradition. The landlord's face lit up with a smile as he mentioned them. When Mr. Sterling proposed to her in the town square, he lined the entire street with flowers from his garden. He's a very romantic young man. And Miss Shaw, who just moved here, she had the sweetest smile. "I pray the Lord blesses them with happiness." The landlord closed his eyes in a sincere prayer. After hearing the word honeymoon, Flynn couldn't process anything else the landlord said. He wandered, lost, through the streets of a foreign country. Snow began to fall, dusting his shoulders. He remembered the year he was blind, when he had told her he wanted to watch the snow with her. He was the one who had lost her. Guilt and regret overwhelmed him. Finally, leaning against a street corner, he broke down and sobbed. After accepting Leo's proposal, the first stop on their round-the-world honeymoon was back home. Hand in hand with Leo, Aurora went to her mother's grave. She was a different person now, vivacious and alive, nourished by love. She held up their intertwined hands. "This is my husband, Leo Sterling. He's a very, very good person." Leo, already stiff with nervousness, tensed up even more at her introduction. Looking at the woman on the tombstone, who shared Aurora's features, he stammered, "Hello, Auntie. I promise I'll be good to Aurora. I'll take care of her and protect her." Then he whispered in Aurora's ear, "I should have worn something more formal. Will your mom be angry that I just showed up like this?" Aurora didn't answer right away. She pretended to think for a moment. "She will." Leo's internal alarms went off. He wrung his hands. "What should I do? Should I go back and change first?" Seeing her beloved so flustered, Aurora burst out laughing. "She'd probably be angry that you haven't started calling her Mom." Only then did Leo realize she was teasing him. He wasn't angry. In fact, he loved this side of her. The old Aurora had always had a fragile quality about her. But after all this time together, she had become more and more vibrant. Leo realized that this was perhaps the real Aurora. He cleared his throat, bowed deeply to the tombstone, and said solemnly, "Mom, I promise I will never let Aurora shed another tear. I want her to live a life free of worries, forever." After chatting for a while longer, they left. As they were leaving, Leo asked, "Why didn't you tell your mom that you found Walter Shaw?" Aurora shook her head and said softly, "The man she loved was a memory. The Walter Shaw of today is not worthy of my mother's love." On their way to the airport, they saw a large screen on the side of a building broadcasting a news report about Julian and Flynn's car accident. By the time the report ended, Aurora was still in a daze. Leo had seen it too. Worried she was upset, he gently pulled her into his arms. "If you want to go see them, I'll go with you." Aurora shook her head, her gaze fixed on the distance. Her voice seemed to dissolve into the wind. "What happens to them has nothing to do with me anymore. I was just thinking that karma really does exist. Everything was once heading in the right direction, but they chose to turn back for Victoria." Just then, the boarding announcement for their flight sounded. She took Leo's hand and walked forward. From now on, it's just us. Aurora would walk hand in hand with Leo through all the years to come.